With over 400 celebrity interviews and tons of pop culture nerdiness, Too Opinionated is a safe haven for your inner geek. Find us at meistercon.com or on YouTube under MeisterCon Pod. And please subscribe. It would really help us out. Thanks, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. Super excited today. I've got the founder of MasterTalk, Brenden Kumarasamy, with me. So welcome, Brenden.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. No, I was telling you offline, I'm so excited to talk with you because you're dealing with an issue that the majority of us have faced at some point. You know, we're either going through it now or we've been through it. And that's kind of the art of public speaking, or just being up in front of a group of people where you got to do a presentation or whatever it is. It can be so intimidating for a lot of us, but you're here to kind of help us with that, which I think is just terrific.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Communication is definitely something that a lot of us struggle with, including me. You know, when I was a kid, I struggled with it. So definitely important.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about your background. Tell me a little bit about what you've done or accomplished in your life, and what kind of led you to creating MasterTalk and working with people on their public speaking.
Yeah, for sure, Michael. So for me, the story starts in college. I went to business school.
Yeah.
And I studied in accounting, which is literally the opposite of what you would think a communication coach would be doing. So I have a bachelor's degree in accounting. I graduated in it. I thought that's what I was going to do with my life.
Yeah, they're kind of opposite of each other. Communication and accounting is kind of opposite.
Exactly. So that's why I always like to say communication chose me. I didn't really choose that field. So what happened was I started competing in these things called case competitions, Michael.
Yeah.
Think of them like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing basketball or baseball or football, I wasn't one of those guys. I did presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I was coaching all the other students so that they could win competition, not for money. I didn't know it was a profession. And I accidentally developed a talent in teaching other people how to communicate ideas, which led to MasterTalk because I felt no one was sharing these videos for free. And here we are today.
I love that. I think that's such a great idea. So when you're first talking with somebody that struggles with public speaking, you know, what's the first thing that you kind of advise them to do? How does it start?
For sure, Michael. So for me, communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So one of those balls is body language, one of them storytelling, one of them's eye contact, one of them's facial expressions.
Right.
And it can get really confusing really fast. So for me, the question has simply been, what are the three easiest balls to juggle? Because if you can juggle those, you could probably develop your skill, your momentum, a lot more over time. So let's start with ball number one, the random word exercise. Pick a word like light bulb, like sink, like trophy case, like laptop, and create random presentations out of thin air. And this serves two main purposes. The first one is that it helps you deal with uncertainty. Life is filled with it, Michael, right? When you're meeting somebody new, you're meeting somebody at a coffee shop, you have no idea how those conversations go sometimes. So when you learn how to master the art of communication, the random word exercise, you master it. And then the second piece to that is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. So if you talk about Disney for 10 seconds, you could talk about your expertise pretty easily.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah, especially if you're starting out talking about something you're already familiar with, much easier than having to practice something ahead of time so that you can talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So I like to tell people I at heart I'm an introvert. You know, I was always like that. I would just be a nervous wreck being in front of people and stuff. And I spent most of my adult life running call centers. So there's a ton of presentations and things that you have to do in those. And I was just a mess all the time. What ended up helping me was this podcast, because, you know, you do 600 interviews. Eventually you get more comfortable just speaking to people. just having those interactions, which even if you're in a group situation, it's the same type of thing. You're still just trying to interact with a person or a group of people. But we tend to get intimidated when that group gets bigger.
I completely agree, right? Especially in the context of introverts. You know what I always say, Michael, is I always spin that question, which is, what
Yeah.
are the advantages that introverts have in communication that they aren't aware of? And there's three main ones. The first one is listening. Introverts are exponentially better at listening than extroverts like me. Hence why they make great hosts of shows. But I'm not that great of a host. I'm a much better guest because I like to ramble. So when you're a great listener, you're really good at it because you speak less on average. So it's easier for introverts to adapt the message faster to their audience. The second piece is the pause. Pausing is such an important skill set when it comes to being an introvert or as a communicator in general. But pausing comes really easy to introverts because they spend less time talking, right? So it's easy for them to pause. And then the third piece is they're a lot more accessible. So if you take somebody like Brene Brown and you compare her to somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk, who's really high energy,
Right.
people either love or hate Gary V. But nobody says that I hate Brene Brown. Everybody loves Brene Brown because she's more introverted.
That's right. Yeah, that actually makes pretty good sense to me. So when you talk about, taking that pause, what is that for? What does that do for you? When you pause, when you're doing that, what does that do?
Yeah, for sure. So it helps with two main things. So the first one is that it helps you buy time to think. So a lot of people do whenever they want time to think is they use filler words. So let's you ask me a question I don't know the answer. I tend to go, yeah, oh yeah, that's my answer. So we use pause, we use ums and ahs to buy time. So when you pause, you're able to buy yourself time before to speak. That's one purpose. The second purpose is it helps you emphasize key points of your message. So if you're speaking at the same pace the entire time, your audience doesn't really know what is the most important part. Versus if I go, this is the most important part. And then I take a pause, people go, oh, whatever he's going to say next is probably important. So that's the second purpose of the pause.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because anybody that has had to speak in front of an audience, if you don't vary your cadence or your tone or your pauses, whatever you're doing, you're going to lose that audience pretty quick.
Very well said. So that's why for me, communication is like juggling 18 balls. You just figure out the easy ones first. Mm-hmm. So you start with the random word exercise. Just do that 5 times a day. Pick 5 different words. Do it for 3 weeks, and you'll have done it 100 times. It's literally as simple as that. Yeah. And then you keep moving through the balls, and you get better at it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So I wanted to ask you about, because I was watching your speaking tips. You had your 5 speaking tips. You talk a little bit about mastering silences.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. So for me, silences and pausing is the same thing, which is how do we learn how to pause? Yeah. But the other piece to that, though, is how do you actually practice this? How do you actually get better at this? And the way that you do it is really simple. Easier said than done. It's easy to implement. It's just hard to do, which is called the endless gaze. So here's what you do. Pick somebody you love who you live with or somebody around you. Sit in front of them for 3 minutes and don't say a word. Don't say a single word for 3 minutes.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. Absolutely. So you're allowed to blink, but you're not allowed to talk. So what happens at the end of those 3 minutes, because you're right, it's super uncomfortable, is you get really good at pausing for 3 seconds. So when you go back to a regular presentation of the real world, it's really easy for you to pause for 1 second, 2 seconds, or 3 seconds. That's the easiest way to practice pausing, but it's not easy, but hard to do, but easy to implement.
I mean, that comes in, I make a lot of use of that with interviewing, because if you're not pretty good at the pause or knowing when to fit your comments in, you're just going to be bumping into each other during the conversation, which isn't the best conversation.
Exactly. I completely agree, right? When you're not pausing and you just keep we all have that friend, right, Michael, who goes, "Hey, let me tell you a story." And 20 minutes later, you're like, "When is this story gonna end? Like, what's the point of this story?" And they
Yeah.
just keep rambling. Whereas the pause really helps you kind of say, "Hey, do you want to jump in with any thoughts or interject so I don't monologue for 20 minutes?" So that's the power of the pause for
Well,
sure.
yeah, because a lot of times when you start to get nervous when you're up in front of people, that's what you do. You just start, it's almost like word salad. You're just throwing it out there because you're so nervous that all you're doing is talking really fast.
Exactly. You like you said, you got to know how to vary the pace, the tone, and it's
Yeah.
one ball at a time, right? So you focus on one, you get it right, you go to the next one, which might be like sending video messages to people that you love for 20 seconds. And then another ball is take a hard question, answer one every single day. So you get really good at explaining your thought process. And then as you stack these balls on top of each other, you get much better at communication over time.
Is there, in your experience, is there a certain part of public speaking that the majority of people struggle with? When you hear comments and stuff, what are people asking you that they need help with?
Yeah, usually people comment the fear. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like what people think they want and what they actually need. So let's kind of go through this. So a lot of people think their biggest challenge is fear, and I disagree with that. And I'll prove it
Yeah.
really simply. Everyone who's listening to this podcast, write down every accomplishment you've achieved in your life that you're really proud of. So that could be getting a first job, applying for college, asking somebody on a date, getting married, having
Yeah.
children, starting a podcast, starting a business. The next question is, okay, everything that you've accomplished that you're proud of, have you accomplished any of these things with zero fear attached to them? And the answer is no,
That's right.
right? Right? Everything you've done in your life that you're proud of, you're scared. So why'd you do it anyways? You did it because the motivation to get the job done was more important than the fear. Example, the fear of being alone is significantly higher. Maybe not when you're young like me, but when you get a little older, the fear of being alone is significantly harder to deal with than the fear of asking somebody on a date. The fear of being broke is significantly higher than the fear of applying and interviewing for a job. So the same context now needs to be applied to communication, which is how do we create a motivation that is greater than the fear that it is attached to, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
a question. How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Just reflect on that question.
Yeah. That I love that because then because that's how most of us work. It's all about, the positives and the negatives and which side outweighs the other, whether or not you're going to do something. It's the same thing if you're dieting or if you're starting an exercise program. If the benefits outweigh the negatives, then you might stick with it. But if it's the reverse, you're probably going to give it up at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. Any advice for someone that, say they found themselves in a situation where they're in front of a group, but they're not really prepared for
Absolutely, Michael. So there's two parts to that. One is the question drill, where
it.
if you're answering all these questions, you're doing the random word exercise, that helps you prepare. Because if you can guess those questions in advance, where
Right.
you just write down a hard question that you think they'll ask you in the presentation, you can guess them in advance. And the other part to that is an exercise I teach for presentations called jigsaw puzzles. So we all know what a jigsaw puzzle is.
Yeah.
Those little things we used to do as kids, you put them all together. So now the question becomes, Michael, when we work on a jigsaw puzzle, which pieces do we start with first and why? And the answer is the edges, because they're easier to find in the box.
That's right.
Right? Take the edges, work your way into the middle. So why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because in communication, unfortunately, we do the opposite. We shove a bunch of content down the middle. We get to the presentation, we ramble throughout the whole thing, and the last slide sounds something like this. Yeah, thanks. Not the right approach. So here's what you do. Practice like puzzle. Start with the edges first. Practice just the introduction of your presentation 10 to 15 times until it's perfect. Not a long time. Your introduction is like 2 minutes. It'll take you 30 minutes. Same thing for the conclusion. What's a great movie with a terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie. And then tackle the middle.
Yeah, see, I love that. I love that. I had the opportunity to interview William Shatner, but I had to do it on stage at a convention center, so that there was a pretty large audience there, and that's exactly the approach that I took. I felt like if I could nail the opening, then that would relax me enough that I was confident in the middle. I felt good about once we got to the question and answer part, I felt pretty good about it. But that opening, if I had went in there and just botched the opening, it could have thrown the whole presentation or the whole interview off. But so that's the part that I really concentrated on, was just practicing so that when I got up there, I could nail that, and it would kind of give me that momentum to get all the way through.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was terrific. So what do you do with someone that it's not what they're saying, it's what they're doing when they're in front of people? Maybe they've got some nervous habits, or they're overusing their hands, whatever, their body language is giving the wrong message. How do you help those people?
Yeah, I think for me, Michael, and super cool that you got to interview William Shatner, by the way, super awesome.
It was pretty great. I have to admit,
cool.
it was a highlight for me.
It was pretty cool. So I would say it's all about building momentum.
Yeah.
Right? Building momentum over time. So I'll give an example, super simple. So when somebody does the random word exercise the first time, they always believe that they can't do it the first time, even once. They go like, "What do you mean, Brenden? I'm supposed to take the word screen and give a presentation on the word screen? Like, I don't have any time to prepare." So then I go, just do it once, and they do it, they get it right. And it's not perfect, but they do it. Kind of like your first episode or my first episode on MasterTalk, right? It's not perfect. I literally started filming with my mom in my mom's basement with a camera. I mean, not even a camera, a phone, right? So that's how it starts. But then after they do it once, I go, what else is possible with their communication skills? And they go, well, I guess I could do it one more time, and then 10 more times. But then after they get to 100, they go, oh, this is really easy. And that's the same mindset we need to bring into speaking, which is, yeah, there's going to be quirks, there's going to be mistakes that we're going to be creating in our speaking. Like you said, you're overusing the hands, not keeping the eye contact. Right. But if you keep focused on one ball at a time and you see the progress, which is often really obvious, after the second or third ball, you get really confident. You go like, I can master the rest of this pretty easily.
Yeah. There's, I was always taught to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So, but for me, the way I handle, kind of talking in front of a group, one is I try to be as prepared as possible, because I think if you're confident in the worst thing you can do is go up there and not really know about what you're trying to talk about, because that'll derail you pretty quick. But if you're confident in the material, then if you get questions or anything, you're able to answer them. It might even relax you answering the questions because you're confident in what you're saying. I mean, is that something that you work with?
Absolutely. I think the only nuance I would draw, Michael, is sometimes you might have too many interviews or too many presentations to prepare for. That's why the question drill, the random word exercise, builds your fundamentals. It's kind of like in basketball, where sure, you could do special cool tricks, but really what all the pros are working on is how to dribble the ball, make sure we get the ball in the net, knowing how to pass the ball. Those are the three fundamentals they keep working on. And it's the same thing here. You work on the fundamentals, the random word exercise. If you do that 300 times, like, you're going to be really good at thinking on your feet. Same thing with the question drill. I mean, if you've drilled as many questions as I have, there's nothing somebody's going to ask you in an interview that goes, oh my God, I didn't think of that. That catches you off guard. And then the other point is exactly what you shared, which is in a week, pick your top 3 interviews, your top 3 things that you feel are like, oh my God, I need to really prepare, like a William Shatner type environment, type situation. Right. Now you want to prepare for those because those things really matter. And that's how you get the job done.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's so valuable. Have you considered writing a book? about
I
this?
will. I will write a book, probably in my early 30s. That's going to be
Yeah,
the timeline right now. I'm holding my breath so that there's a lot more anticipation for it, so we can hit some big numbers with it. But yeah, I'll be a while, but I'll write it.
that's awesome. Are you doing public speaking yourself about this type of thing?
Yes, but I would say most of my speaking engagements, besides like a free one I give every 2 weeks that people can check out, is I mostly do them for corporations and the really small workshops.
Yeah.
So it won't be like a keynote where I'm speaking in front of 10,000 people. For my topic, it's more, hey, meet the leadership team, like the CEO, the SVP, and a group of like 10 people. And I do like an interactive workshop with them privately. And that's what I get paid to do often.
Yeah, I like that, and I've been through similar things with companies, and that's a those smaller groups. That's a really good way to do it and to practice and kind of learn some techniques and stuff in a especially in a peer group, because sometimes you're a little more comfortable with a peer group. So I do think that's really valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty great. You know, one of the things that I know in my life that has caused me issues is not necessarily how big the audience is, but who's in the audience. You know, if I'm talking to people that are higher up than my level, I tend to be more nervous than if I'm talking, say, down the ladder. With that, anything there that may help as far as relaxing, no matter who your audience is.
Sure, Michael. And you brought up a great point, which is something a lot of us struggle with. Like, let's say we're a manager at a company, we're talking to the VP or the SVP. We're like, oh, I'm
Yeah,
really nervous around these people. So there's two parts to this. The first part is how do we build the confidence internally and externally? So let's start internal. For me, the internal one's really simple. If you do, and I go back to the fundamentals, right? If you do the random word exercise 100 times, that's 100 times more than your CEO has done it because they have no idea what this exercise is. They've never heard about this,
sure.
right? Or the question drill. So it's an internal knowing that you've done it more, you put in more time than everyone else on your leadership team combined, so you can create the magic. That's one piece. The other piece that a lot of us don't think enough about is we tend to forget that these people, including Bill Gates, including Elon Musk, including William Shatner, right? They're all just human beings.
That's right.
And the only way to know that is by being friends with them. So my advice to anyone working at a company is send coffee emails to people that you're really scared to talk to. So if you're really scared to talk to the vice president at this company, send them an email and just say, hey, I'm in the company, I've been working here for X number of years, or I'm new. I'd love to just chat with you for 15 minutes just to get to know you more. That's it. There's no agenda. And as you
Yeah.
talk to them more, you start to realize they're normal people. And I'll give you my epiphany story. I was a 19-year-old kid and I wanted to work for one of the big four accounting firms, right? Remember,
Okay.
bachelor's degree in accounting, right?
Yeah.
So what did I start doing? Because my dad and my mom were factory workers. So I didn't have any relationships in the business world. So I needed to hustle. I needed to go
Yeah.
out and get them. So I emailed these really big executives, and there's this one guy, let's call him Jim. And Jim was the head of taxation for the whole country. The whole country.
Yeah.
So he says yes to me and he goes, I'll have my assistant coordinate. Let's meet for 30 minutes and have a coffee. And I was like, oh my God. And I called him sir in the email. It was so hilarious. And then I got there in my prom suit, Michael, because I couldn't afford anything better. I'm sitting there and he comes up to me, shakes my hand, and asks me something I never thought an executive would ask me. And the question was, hey, Brenden, how was your summer? And I just went, whoa, CEOs have summers? And, and he was just a really cool guy. So that's really the key.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. You know, most of the time, you know, those executives, they've worked their way up. So they weren't always executives. So most of them, they understand that struggle and that fear because they've been there themselves. And if you put yourself out there a little bit, a lot of times they'll take on like a mentor role with you. It could turn out really good.
Absolutely. That's really the key is oftentimes when somebody says yes to a coffee conversation like
Yeah.
the one, because I know there might be a little bit of fear from people in the audience. If somebody says yes, almost all the time it's going to be a great conversation. Because if they were bad people, they would ignore the email or not reply to it or say no. Right. So if they're saying yes, like the guy in question, Jim, as an example, he loved me before the conversation started because he started that coffee chat with, you know how many people reach out to me, Brenden, cold? You're literally the only person this year. I really wanted to meet you. Like, who is this kid? And literally he spent the rest of the 40 minutes. I didn't even say anything. He told me his life story about how he grew up in like Greece or something and how he got an offer at this company and he worked so hard. And at the end of the 40 minutes, he was like, I really like you, kid. Let me give you a recommendation. That's it.
I mean, that's awesome.
That's all he did. Yeah.
Yeah, and you basically just showed up. He did
That's
most
it.
of the work.
Literally. And he bought me coffee too. I literally just showed up. That's all I did.
Well, he definitely should buy you coffee. The higher ranking person should be buying the coffee.
Absolutely, absolutely. But still, it's still
As when I'm talking with somebody or a group of people, I've been lucky enough to do some panel interviews. I kind of look at it as, it's my responsibility to make sure they're comfortable. And I kind of look at that the same way. If you're standing in front of however big the group is, you've got a little bit of responsibility to make them feel comfortable, because a lot of times, even sitting in the audience, people are nervous because they feel like they need to interact, but they don't know how to interact. So if you're up front and you can worry about helping them, it'll make you relax to the point that you forget that you were nervous because you're so focused on your audience.
100%. And the build up to your point, Michael, is the easiest way to fix that, frankly. Once again, simple ideas that nobody implements. Have dinner with your audience.
Yeah.
There's so many times after I do a workshop or after I do a keynote, I literally just stick around. Or I have lunch with them before the presentation starts. Like my last corporate client, this is 3 weeks ago or a month ago, I forgot. It was literally, I showed up an hour before the presentation started. They brought lunch for me and everyone else. And I just sat around with them and I just literally asked them about their life. So I built a relationship with them.
I like
so
that.
When you do that, it's a lot less stressful to show up on stage and give a keynote.
Yeah, I actually like the ahead of time, because then, people get to know you a little bit. They're a little more relaxed. So then when you get up in front and stuff, it's not, you don't have to necessarily do the icebreaker type of thing because you've already done that.
Exactly. And one crazy thing I do, which people shouldn't implement, but it's just random, is what the guy did at that company is he sent me a list of everybody's name in the workshop. There's 15 people and all their pictures. So when I showed up at lunch, I said, "Oh, you must be Tony. You must be Sandra." And everyone's freaking out. They're like, "How do you know all of our names?" So that was a fun one too.
Yeah, I like that. Do you have, when companies reach out to you for those, type of engagements, is there specific things that they want you to touch on? What's the majority of the time? What are you there going over?
Yeah, great question. I would say most of the time they let me run the show and what I want to talk about, because usually the workshop is around a company retreat. So they have a retreat with all of their senior leaders and they go, "Okay, Brenden, you're one of 8 speakers that we want to have, and we want you to talk about communication. What ideas do you have?" That's usually how the conversation goes.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, "Hey, these are the 3 things that I usually talk about at this level to these people." And usually at that point they go, "Sounds great to us." And then I show up and I deliver it. Yeah.
Have you been offered work from some of these companies? Have they tried to hire you away from
Away from the business, like to work for them full time?
Yeah, to work for them full time.
It hasn't happened yet, but honestly, I'm glad it hasn't happened, because then it would be really hard for me to say no to them, right?
Yeah.
Then it creates a bad relationship. So I'm actually glad. I think a lot of them just assume that I'm like this billionaire. So I don't know why. Maybe it's my chair. Maybe it's the chair that I give up.
He's got a good chair. He must know what he's doing.
But he's probably making $1 gajillion a year. I mean, there's no point of hiring this guy as an employee.
What's the one thing that we haven't touched on that you think is important for public speaking?
For sure. I think we covered pretty good ground. I think the most important thing is to realize, as you've demonstrated with 600 interviews, Michael, frankly, is the best way to speak is to speak. You can listen to me and you talk all day for those who are listening. But if you want to get better at speaking, you need to do one thing. And that one thing is, are you booking 15 minutes in your calendar every single day to do the random word exercise? Because it only takes 5 minutes. To do the question drill, one question a day for 5 minutes, you'll be pretty solid. And to use the last 5 minutes to send a few video messages to people that you love. If you do just those three things consistently, you do nothing else from this interview, you will 100% get results in 30 days.
I like the video messages. That's a great idea because we're so used to texting or writing an email, but you do a video message, you're helping yourself, because even though you're not like speaking to them directly, just having to record yourself and send it. I like that.
Correct. Like there's a great woman who interviewed me a while back. Her name's Christina. And I asked her about this. I told her about video messages. And she just sent one to her grandparents. That's it. It's not about overthinking it because she hasn't seen them in 6 months. And it really made their day. The only rule to the video message, though, is you're not allowed to retake the video.
Oh, I like that too. Yeah. Yeah. That's intimidating, though, for some people.
Exactly. That's why you start with family. That's why for me, it's not about like starting a podcast or posting on social media. It's about saying, hey, are you just sending a quick 20-second video to like a brother of yours or a family member or a cousin or a best friend? I would start there because it's a private video. You're just sending it through Facebook or through WhatsApp or through some other app. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. That's actually really good advice because it gives you that practice. And I think, we're talking about being in front of a group, but really all of this applies for any, conversation, interaction you have with another person, because a lot of us struggle, with being comfortable, even one-on-one. So anything you can do to get yourself comfortable just speaking, I think is a big plus.
1000%. For me, communication is always across the board because it's the way that you give a presentation for sure, but it's so much more than that. It's the way that you talk to your family. It's the way that we raise our children. It's the way that we talk to new people, strangers. It's the way that we improve the quality of our life. That's why for me, I've always seen communication as the accelerant of dreams. It doesn't matter what your dream is. Whether you want to be a big producer on Hollywood, whether you want to have a big business, whether you want to grow your career, communication helps you accelerate that outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So if let's say you're doing a presentation and for whatever reason, you've prepared, you felt like you were ready for it, but then you get up there and you just go blank. For whatever it is, at some point in the presentation, you just lose it. You just lose it. Any advice on getting back on track?
Right. So 2 parts to that. One, this is more my philosophy, is practice so much that never happens. Right. Like if you do the random word exercise so many times, I know I always go back to the same things, but it really works.
Yeah.
You get so good at thinking on your feet that you're able to navigate those situations pretty well. That's the first piece. And the other piece around that is simulating an environment that is exponentially harder than the one that you're going to speak in front of. I'll give you an example.
Like that.
Let's say an executive calls me and goes, hey, Brenden, I got this meeting in front of 5 people that I have a 10-year working relationship with that I'm presenting a big project to. I go, great, Isaac, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take 5 of my executives. I'm going to make your life a living hell for 45 minutes. How about that? And then I start badgering them. I start interrupting. I was like, this makes any sense. No sense. Your project, your financials make no sense. And I start running holes into them. So when they go to their presentation, they go, that was really easy. Nobody is yelling at me. Nobody is badgering me. So that's one piece to that, is just do the harder thing. And then the other piece, which is more in relation to what you said, hey, what happens if you draw a blank? If it's really bad, you could literally just go, hey, let me just go back to the last slide here. Let's just recap what I heard so far. And you just recap the last point and it just gives you more time to keep going. That's it.
Yeah, I actually like that. And like for me, I think it's a mistake to write everything out because you're not going to have time to glance down and read. But if you bullet point it, if you just put little cues to remind you of where you're at, that helps me. So most of the time I don't need to look down, but if I get stuck, look down, I see one of those cues, and then I'm back on track.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, so Brenden, we talked a little bit about the future where you're going to write a book about this, which I think would be amazing. What else is coming? What's your plans to take MasterTalk to the next level?
Yeah, for sure, Michael. My vision for MasterTalk is I think the next Elon Musk, the next Oprah Winfrey is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach. So for me, it's all about saying, how do we create these resources that are free and accessible to everybody? So I'd say for me, long term is really making these tools accessible to the whole world. In my short term to get to there, I would say this year it's probably focusing a lot more on Instagram because I found a lot more success on YouTube. So now it's about kind of expanding out the reach to other social media platforms and getting on more shows, of course, and really scaling the coaching practice.
Yeah, I love that. Have you ever considered acting?
It's funny story around that. Well, it's not that funny. I did act in a commercial last year, but it was completely an accident. So what happened was one of my VPs, one of my clients, texts me and goes, "Hey, I have a big opportunity." And obviously I'm thinking, "Oh, big B2B contract with the company."
Yeah.
Because it was a pretty big SaaS company. So I get on the call with her and she goes, "Hey, like there's a commercial and blah blah blah." And I'm thinking, "Oh, so do you want me to like train the actors and help them with speaking? Is some of them stuttering or something?" And I'm thinking this is gonna be a big deal. And then she goes, "No, I want you to act in the commercial." And I looked at her, I was like, "I'm not an actor. I'm not gonna spend a day reading a script." And then she told me how much she was gonna pay me for it. And I was like, you know what? I think I should try acting out just to see what would happen. I'm just kidding. It wasn't that much money. I kind of just told her, "Look, I'll say yes to this, even if it's not a lot of money, if you get me more clients from the thing." So I did it. And it was a fun experience. Honestly, I have a lot more respect for actors now, Michael. At the end of that,
It's not easy.
That's not easy, man.
Because there's some similarities to public speaking because if you're really good at it, you're changing some of your tone or your emotion changes, that type of thing. But to be able to change those emotions or to act as somebody completely different, whole different story. That's not an easy job.
It's not. I think acting is way harder than public speaking because in public speaking, you could change 50% of your script as you're speaking, and the person in the audience doesn't realize because you're the expert.
That's right.
So like let's say I got asked the same 10 questions around speaking, I could give 10 different answers, and as long as they make sense, the host isn't going to say, "Well, you're wrong," because the host is not an expert on speaking. But in acting, it's very different because you could change the script to a certain extent for sure. But for the most part, it's like this is the director's vision for what we're trying to do. It's like, "Hey, what are you doing, Tom? You're like changing half of the script. What's going on?"
Well, Brenden, this has been terrific and I think very informative. I love what you're doing because I think it's such a good service that so many of us need help with. So I love that. What's next? We talked a little bit about it. Do you have is there a next level of MasterTalk? Like, have you been building towards something? So now you got that's the beginner course, but if you're really an expert speaker, here's what could help.
For sure, Michael. Thanks so much for having me on the show, brother. This is really fun.
Of course.
So two easy ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel, and just check out MasterTalk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way to keep in touch, for those of you who are interested in coaching, is come to one of my free workshops. So I do a free one on communication every 2 weeks. That's live. It's over Zoom, and I facilitate it. It's super fun. So if you want to attend that call, just go to rockstarcommunicator.com and just register for the next one.
I love it. That's terrific. Are you on any other social media?
I am. So Instagram is Master Your Talk because I couldn't get MasterTalk. And LinkedIn, my goodness, if you can figure out how to spell my name, you could totally add me on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to reply.
Well, your last name's long, which I'm a little jealous of because
Why?
I always thought mine was too short with that. But I don't think it's super difficult to pronounce. I've definitely run into harder.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you like, I'm terrible with names because I tend to say them like I read them, and a lot of times that's not how they're pronounced with that. But if you talk to enough people, you know, you even get comfortable asking. You know, a lot of times before an interview, I'll be like, "This is what I think is the way to say your name, but is that correct?" And most people, they don't mind, you know, letting you know if you're saying it correctly. Whereas if you just botch it, you know, they're either it's going to upset them, or what most people do is they just ignore it. And that's not a great thing either, because you want to make the people you're talking with comfortable. So you need to get their name right.
For sure. I'm definitely in the second camp because at the end of the day, like for all the interviews that all of us do, my goodness, if I was frustrated every time somebody mispronounced my name, I'd be a horrible human being. I'd just be miserable every single time.
Yeah.
So now I just go like, just call me Brenden for MasterTalk. Super easy. Everybody's happy.
Yeah, everybody's happy at that point.
Yeah.
All right, Brenden, hold on 1 second. Brenden Kumarasamy from MasterTalk. Hope you guys enjoyed that. It's a little bit different than what we normally do, but for an introvert, I felt like this was an interview we needed to have, because I know so many people struggle with public speaking. Like if you had told me, even just 5 years ago, when I was still working call centers, that I would be talking with famous people daily and interacting, there's no way I would have believed that. I was too shy, too introverted, too in my own head, you know, and kind of psyched myself out in those situations. And being honest, I probably wasn't as prepared to speak as I should have been, because I didn't have the confidence that I could do it well. So that kind of held me back. So I thought having Brenden on was worthwhile. You know, a lot of the stuff he's talking about, I kind of figured out on my own through this podcast. But I think the one thing that he kept bringing up that's so important is repetition. You know, if you're nervous to speak in front of a group, then try to do that as much as you can, because over time, and it's really not as long as you think, it happens fairly quickly, you're going to gain confidence to the point that if you have to get up in front of a group, it's no big deal. If you get called on in a meeting or a classroom, whatever it is, no big deal, because you're prepared. Even if you're not 100% on the subject, your responses sound more thought out, more, let's say, influential than what they would be if you're not used to speaking in front of people. If I hope that made a little bit of sense. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again this week. I definitely don't take that for granted. If it wasn't for you guys, I'd still be working in call centers. So happy not to be in call centers anymore. Met some wonderful people, but podcasting definitely a passion of mine that I came to late in life that I never thought would become a passion, but here we are. If you're finding us for the first time and you liked what you listened to or what you watched, and you'd like to support us, we could definitely use the help. You know, it is not easy distinguishing yourself as a podcast from the millions of podcasts that are out there. So we definitely could use the help, and it's easy to do. It's free. You know, if you're watching our YouTube channel, it's MeisterCon Pod. All we ask is that you subscribe. Don't just watch the videos, subscribe. It really helps us out, because we can take those numbers, and when we go to get guests, it gives us a little bit of leverage. This is what we can offer. You know, if you talk to us, this is how many people are going to see it. That type of thing. It's really important. So please hit subscribe. If you're listening, wherever you're listening at, just hit subscribe. That'll help us as well. I think today we're on episode 573. So we're closing in on 600. You can get all of those, audio and video, on our website, meistercon.com. Definitely check us out there. If we're doing anything in studio, it'll be there. If we're going on location, it'll be there. If we're covering a convention, it'll be there. Whatever we have going on, it's on the website, meistercon.com. So definitely check us out there. Thank you guys so much. This was fun. I enjoyed this. Until next time, bye everybody.